They're going to call my number, I believe.
Okay.
I'm going to tell him to call me when he gets here. I told Dave to listen to the news feed, the feed on News Now Live, and I told him about that.
Okay.
He's going to call
You
me.
can at least listen in while he's driving in then.
Yeah. He's going to call me when he gets here. I may just have you
Yeah.
go get him. I don't know if I'm going to check this. Okay. All right, you guys want to turn your mics on? Yeah, you're all set. Thanks. All right, well, good morning. I know some of you that normally tune in for the Board of Works will notice that we're not having a Board of Works meeting today. But in lieu of that, I have asked that we sit down and together with law enforcement, first responders, and our county health officer address the current COVID situation in the county. We are also looking at doing this on a weekly basis. We'll be starting next Wednesday at 10:30. We will live stream these broadcasts. I believe they're up also on Facebook Live. And again, just to try and give an update, if we determine that these meetings need to occur more frequently, we will certainly do that. But I know the other thing I wanted to mention is talk to the commissioner, County Commissioner Brad Jackson yesterday. He's planning on originally next Wednesday was going to be our first meeting, but I thought in lieu of some of the things that have happened, we would start today with our first press meeting regarding COVID in Kosciuszko County. So again, we will be doing this weekly at 10:30, live streamed, again, more frequent if necessary, and we'll also bring in potentially other members of our team. We'll probably ask the county sheriff to come in. We'll probably talk. Again, commissioner will be coming in, and other public health officials, again, to try and keep everybody updated and answer questions locally as this situation seems to be ramping up. So today we're fortunate to have Dr. Bill Remington from the Kosciuszko County Health Department. He's with us today, and again, he will be a regular part of these meetings, again, that will start next Wednesday at 10:30 every week. So I also want to welcome Chief Whitaker and Chief Wilson from Police Department and Fire Department, respectively. We'll get to them here shortly. But what I wanted to do was first talk about the city's response. As you know, we issued a stay at home for our employees that expires this Monday night at 11:59. So we are going to extend that. I signed a new executive order today extending that for another 2 weeks. We were kind of waiting for the governor to make a move. I anticipate that his press conference today at 2:30, he will announce the state more than likely will be, most likely, almost assuredly will be extending the stay-at-home order. It also expires on April 6th. So we have tried to maintain the same type of schedule. We're pretty much following what the governor does with the state. We're following his guidelines. We're following the federal guidelines. We're just trying to bring that back to our community and again, as we try and fight this. So again, probably this afternoon, I highly anticipate that he will extend that state stay-at-home order. So with that, as I mentioned, I'm going to extend our executive order for our employees to stay, providing provisions for stay-at-home for non-essential employees, and this will run through April 18th. I would probably think this is going to go longer than April 18th, but I think doing it in 2-week increments gives us some flexibility if things change, if other factors start to come into play. We're not locked in for a month, so I expect that in 2 weeks we will, well, I know in 2 weeks we'll take a look at it, but I expect it will probably be more in alignment with whatever the governor's timeline comes out to be today. But for now, the executive order that the city is expanding will go through April 18th. And just to kind of review that, our city offices will remain closed to the public. All of our programs, recreational programs, rentals are all canceled now through the 18th, and I would anticipate again beyond that. Our staffing in the city buildings is down to pretty much bare bones, and we're also even reducing our hours at all of our city offices. A lot of our employees are able to telework from home. We're able to check messaging from home. But there is some amount of business that does need to be kept up with in the office, being certainly mail, claims, paying bills. But I've instructed our department heads that if employees are in working to do those types of things, as soon as they're done with that work, they are to go home. Essential services obviously will remain available. So again, if you have a need, phone the office that you need assistance with, or leave a message. If they're not there, leave a message by phone or online. You will certainly be given full attention. Just may not be quite as rapid as we're normally allowed to do. So I'm going to kind of go through department by department what to expect, starting with our police and fire. I know they're working together with all the county agencies to provide uniformity in their approach to this. Our number one goal is to keep our public safety officers safe, but able to do their job, which again is very challenging at this point. So I'd like to call on Chief Whitaker to talk a little bit about the safety to his officers, how he's been working with his group of police chiefs in the county and the prosecutor's office, how they've all coordinated to have pretty much a standard protocol. So, Chief?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, as the Mayor stated, uniformity is key in a countywide law enforcement effort. And so today I'll speak not only as the police chief of Warsaw, but on behalf of all of these police chiefs that throughout the county, Prosecutor Hampton, Sheriff Dukes, and again, every law enforcement entity has participated in these group meetings that are now being taken, obviously, by conference calls. But we made great stride in working with Central Dispatch. As I think anybody would expect, it's important that we're all under the same guidelines for this temporary occasion during the COVID-19 virus pandemic. So we do have a Kosciuszko County Law Enforcement Agency's guidelines for operation that was facilitated through Prosecutor Dan Hampton, and again with all the police chiefs. That is not for public use, but just want the public to know that that your law enforcement agencies are regularly communicating. We are preparing. We're taking all the measures that we can take at this time to prepare our staff and provide the personal protective equipment that's going to be needed. We certainly have never been down this road before, but I've told the mayor, I think just yesterday, that I feel very, very good about Warsaw PD's officers, the training, the equipment that we continue to obtain, that we're going to provide the services that's needed for our great community. As far as internally in the office, obviously we are still a police department. We're functioning the same as a police department. Our office staff obviously is more of a skeleton crew, but our police officers are considered essential employees. So all of our officers, we've We've changed the shifts so that we have better coverage. And this is coverage 24 hours a day to provide the best service and be the most prepared we can for our community. That includes both detectives and patrol units. I guess with that, Mayor,
Yeah, Chief, I know a lot of the protocol and adjustments you've made have been with, again, as you mentioned, a group of local law enforcement agencies. I know you're also looking to your peer groups nationwide and, again, making these adjustments, how you're going to act when you come upon a scene. And again, we'll probably get into that a little bit when we start talking about personal protective equipment and that type of thing. But again, I think what you have established through the department is pretty much best practices as this crisis continues.
absolutely. I mean, early on, obviously, social distancing is key, and it's what we've been preaching from the beginning. And we certainly want to show the community that we are doing our part. Our officers do not congregate. You will not see them together. We are all over the city and ready to respond to calls. The same as within the building. Our department is not what it has been, but we are certainly encouraging officers to be out and about, but we're keeping our distance from each other. And that's for obvious concerns. We certainly don't want to have a number of officers quarantined, which is happening all over the nation, which would lead to a problem of covering the shifts, covering the patrol. So we're making every effort to have the manpower as we continue to move forward, not knowing how long this is going to last. And as the mayor stated, receiving some instruction or direction from, I guess, from the state level. I will tell you that obviously, I think last night was the first time we heard from, at least in a conference, Superintendent Doug Carter, the Indiana State Police. But he has provided us some direction in the form of letters, memos, and he, through the prosecutor's office, is really helping establish the enforcement efforts as we move forward pertaining to the orders that the governor has given out.
Thank you. And Chief Wilson, I know you've been working very closely with county-wide emergency responders, volunteer departments, and again, in similar vein as Chief, and that's as you are first responding and importance of keeping our guys safe. Please just give us a little thumbnail of the group you're meeting with. I know you had a call in this morning. Talk a little bit about how your department is prepared for this.
Through our department, there was an opportunity, even with Chief Whitaker, that Kosciuszko County Emergency Services Cooperative was formed first part of March. That's management personnel from law enforcement agencies, the health department, the coroner's office, Lutheran EMS. We communicate, we start a phone tree off with naturally the health department to find out what happened during the last 24 hours in your county. We pull all this information together and we then email that back out to each other so that all of us are working on the same page. That also goes to every county volunteer fire department in Kosciuszko County. So what we're doing as a group is looking at not only what to do today, but we're setting the gauge and the plans for down the road in the event that this escalates. So we're looking at 2 to 3 weeks out. EMA, Ed Rock's doing an awesome job at trying to find supplies so that we can keep first responders, which isn't just the EMS people, but that's your firefighters and your volunteer departments throughout the county and law enforcement prepared to protect themselves so that they can protect their families.
All right, thank you, appreciate it. And I know we'll be getting back with both of you potentially with questions and a few other items. Just want everyone to know the street department obviously will continue to collect curbside waste, and that includes our large item pickup. I know a lot of you may be cleaning your garages out while you're at home, stuck at home, and the city will still continue to pick up the large items. Street department will be filling potholes and emergency repairs. Hopefully we're done with snow removal. But again, there will be reduced staff and reduced hours. we will be responding as we need to. And certainly mowing is getting ready to start, and that'll be a part of their function as well. The airport must remain open by FAA standards, but our activity is all but halted out there. There is reduced staffing, but we are available for handling incoming and outgoing flights. Building and plan, again, very reduced hours and staffing. A lot can be handled by the phone and online. They will be handling permit requests that way. Our clerk treasurer's office is processing claims and paying bills, but again, with the reduced staff and shortened hours. Cemetery is continuing to do their work with split shifts. Parks have reduced their staff. They will be beginning to mow. There's also some online recreation activities on the Warsaw Parks Facebook page. Talked to Sheila this morning, and she's trying to, in lieu of all the recreational activities that are being canceled, she's getting very creative and posting, she said, 3 or 4 times on the Warsaw Facebook page, some online activities. So kudos to the park department for that. So with that said, going through pretty much all of our departments, again, I fully expect that the governor will extend the stay-at-home order. For how long and under what circumstances, we'll all find out probably at about 2:30 today. And I want to reiterate, we've been following the governor's executive orders that restricts travel to essential, and we're also giving great credibility to the state and federal definitions of essential businesses. I think this is an important time to talk about how critical this is, and I know Dr. Remington will certainly address the need to stay at home, to not be out on the road. If your business is not listed as essential, the direct definition, the businesses should not be open, and we certainly ask people not to be congregating outside. If you've got to go to the store, if you got to go check on a loved one, if you are essentially traveling to work, go from point A to point B, do your job, keep your distance, wash your hands, go back home, but we don't want congregating. I'll take a minute to talk about the parks and social distancing and getting outside. The weather's getting nice. I know folks want to get outside, and they should. I think it's great to enjoy your backyard with your family. A lot of work to be done at home, but please stay with your family. And if you do happen to go out and take a walk, respect social distancing, respect the fact that this virus, and I'll again defer to Dr. Remington, but the virus can travel outside as well as it can inside. So we will leave our parks open, but if we find we're having trouble with congregating, we will ask our law enforcement to ask people to go home. If we have a continued problem with that, we will probably have to shut the parks down. But for now, the parks do remain open. I know on the trails, again, respect that 6-foot distance, and again, practice the same safe distances and hand washing you would indoors. But we do want you to get outside. I think that's important. Obviously, today we are prepared to follow any further restrictions that the governor may announce. I don't have any inkling of what that might be, if it's just an extension of what we're doing now. But I did want to go back to Chief Whitaker for just a second to talk about enforcement of the governor's executive orders. I know he's received guidance from the Indiana State Police. The Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco are going to be involved in enforcement of restaurants and bars. ISP is giving you direction, Chief, on, and then talk a little bit about locally what the local group has talked about in that vein.
You're talking about the enforcement of the
Right.
orders. Well, right now, when it comes to the establishments, I don't know that we're really getting that many calls. But obviously, as the mayor said, I believe that state excise and state police will be involved. But for us, through the prosecutor's office, is going to be simply just to document and provide that information to the prosecutor's office for a determination. So at this point, we certainly, as police officers, have a difficult time maybe establishing what is essential and what isn't. So if we believe something is non-essential, we can provide that information to the prosecutor's office for his review and determination. And then on with that is the travel. Obviously, travel's going to be a big part of what we deal with. For the most part, you know, I gotta think that our community, been a part of this community my whole life, that, you know, we're going to step up to the challenge, and we're going to abide by these orders. And you know, our intent is not to stop cars and ask them if you have purpose to be traveling. If we are to come across you for other means, obviously that could come up. But for the purpose of, as the mayor stated, you know, we want individuals to be outside, not cooped up. We believe that's just going to additionally, potentially increase the crime. But I would ask that if you are in the parks, you're not congregating. If you're anywhere, just do not congregate. Keep that social distance. And, you know, the governor has hit on it. I think most of us have watched his press conferences, and his staff has hit on it time and time again. And, you know, as we have locally, we've hit on it with our staff. The social distancing is the key. And not exposing our friends and our family.
All right. I just got a question from Dan Spalding, and he just wanted you to kind of clarify. You'd said that as far as police guidelines, you know, you talked about those being somewhat confidential. Could you explain the reason for that?
Well, I think it goes without being said that, you know, we do not need the public to know the temporary guidelines, our focus. But I think it's important that the community knows that we have established and we are in one accord under the guidance of our prosecutor when it comes to, but these guidelines are more than just the prosecutor just help facilitate. These are guidelines for the safety of the officers. These are temporary guidelines for office procedures. You know, and probably the biggest reason we collectively decided we needed to have this uniformity was because of central dispatch. As you can imagine, at a time like this, central dispatch, when they get a call, they need to know how to respond to those calls and who to direct those calls to and how we're going to handle them. I mean, initially, the guidelines were just not taking certain calls, right? We weren't fingerprinting, we weren't doing title checks. We were trying to distance ourselves and, you know, and limit the amount of exposures that we would have. And that just grew into a 2-page document, confidential document. But it is just a standard operating procedure when it comes to law enforcement in Kosciuszko County. And I assume that other counties are doing it, but I can tell you that we jumped on this early. Everybody's been on the same page. And I will hit on it again. You know, just the kudos and the time that's been put in by Prosecutor Hampton, Sheriff Dukes, Captain Travis Marsh for the Sheriff's Department, Syracuse Police Chief Jim Lane, Winona Lake Police Chief Joe Hahn, North Webster Police Chief Greg Church, Milford Police Chief Derek Kreider. And we just greatly appreciate everybody's involvement and participation. It's been, it's unfortunate to take something like this, but our group has collectively has come together, and we've had great conversation about public safety.
So, you know, obviously there's security issues involved on these guidelines, and it goes without saying that those are confidential. As far as you know, the hygiene and so forth, you know, wearing of masks and wiping down and the hygiene approach to it, I mean, I don't think there's anything that is any different than what you guys are going to be doing if you run into a situation and the need for masks. But the important thing is protecting our officers, not only from the virus, but from, you know, any undue exposure, obviously. So, but thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. So, I'm going to ask Dr. Remington to give us an update, a local update, and just his current thoughts on where we're at today. I was also sent a question by Dan Spalding. He asked me if we were in a baseball game, a 9-inning game, what inning would we be in right now? And I think that's a great question for Dr. Bill to lead off with.
Thank you for inviting me. I love the conversation I've been hearing. To hear Chief Whitaker and Chief Wilson discuss the dialogue amongst their professional ranks and the interagency spread of that dialogue is exactly what this community needs. And it'll be moving forward. As you know, it's a very dynamic situation. What I tell you today could change tomorrow. As an example of that, we reported 8 cases yesterday from the health department. I phoned my communicable disease nurse, Teresa Reed, on my way to this meeting and asked her, what's the latest count? She said 10. And I phoned her back a few minutes later with something I'd forgotten to ask her, and she said 11. And the cases will certainly come up quickly now. Mr. Spalding's question is, I think, a great question. In a baseball game of 9 innings, my estimation is that we are in about the 2nd inning. The legs of this curve are uncertain, but probably a 2-month spread, 8 innings, maybe 9, maybe some extra innings, is very likely. We're seeing that count still pretty small for Kosciuszko County, but if you just look at that Indiana State Department of Health dashboard, if you've been watching that, you'll see how those numbers have really escalated in the metropolitan areas and quickly coming up even in some of the more rural areas. We will experience that. I cannot predict perfectly what that number will be. The month of April is going to be heavy. I think 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, this will feel very heavy. The month of May is going to be heavy. Perhaps toward the end of May, early June, we'll have definitely felt an easing off. Whether we feel comfortable in bringing our foot off the gas with some of the hardcore social distancing executive orders is yet to be determined. This is a very respectable event. I've been your county health officer for 25 plus years. We've seen a handful of big events. It probably doesn't need to be said, but this is clearly the biggest event from a population, depth of spread, population impact over those 20-some years. We have the tools in this community to thrive despite this. We will get through this. The faces around this table, the voices that I'm increasingly hearing as I get connected in new ways personally with a broader multi-agency approach is extremely reassuring to me. We are truly blessed in this community.
Okay. I know you and I had discussed yesterday the importance of some of the essential businesses continuing on and how critical this response is, how critical these universal precautions are. Again, can you talk a little bit about the emphasis and the importance of that to businesses that are remaining open, to those that are traveling to and from those businesses? I certainly will address that again, but I just wanted it from your perspective, the importance of that.
Well, we're in this rural county, and we will undoubtedly have cases, in fact already have, that are starting to impact some of the shops. As a health department, we will spring into those environments in a traditional case contact investigation motif. That is, we start with a latest call for a positive case and we track down who their close contacts are. If it involves a large employer in the county or any employer in the county, and it looks like there may be a pool of close contacts there, we will have that conversation. Any employer that quickly sees how this can impact them when we ask to quarantine a significant number of their workforce, is immediately even more deeply committed to all the basics of the public health messaging that you've been hearing, the presidential's or White House task force, the 30-day plan, the social distancing details. We need that in shops as best as we can, as well as each of us moving about a community. We do have carve-outs with essential businesses aplenty in this county. And I don't sense any trouble with that at this point. Whether or not the governor will move in some more restrictive action is hard to predict.
So, yeah, and I know the comments that that you make and I make and all of us make. Just the 2-3 weeks this thing's been going on here locally, we know that every day brings a new set of circumstances. And I think that's why it's important that we get together frequently and we may update what we're talking about. Hopefully next time you can add an inning to your forecast, but you know, that's just certainly something we need to all understand, that at current moment, I think we're all trying to look at it as it sits here in the current. Something else, Dr. Bill, I wanted you to talk about. You gave a really good answer yesterday when you were talking to emergency responders about the use of masks, and I'll preface this by saying I know there's no easy answer to this. The public is wondering what they should do. There are different types of masks that I know you all are using, surgical versus the N95. There's a shortage, obviously. There's a terrible shortage. We have local folks sewing not only masks but gowns to try and meet the needs of, I know Miller's Mary Manor and the other nursing homes are having difficulty getting materials. Certainly hospitals and the healthcare providers are, again, as we get into the later innings, this could be a bigger concern. But I know early on I'd talked to Chief Wilson about maybe having the EMTs talk to our first responders about the proper way and when to use a mask so that we don't waste them. The questions have come up, can we disinfect the masks and reuse them again? So it's a broad question, but you know, to boil it down, should our citizens wear masks in public? How should our first responders use masks? And again, knowing you've got wisdom in your answer, I'd like to hear from you on that.
The mask question is a great question. The CDC is wrestling with this right now. As you know, they've taken a conservative posture and have held short of strongly encouraging the entire population in this country to wear a mask when you're out and about doing your community engagement. Other countries around the world have taken a different step. My simple word today is, sure, wear a mask. Can I tell you that you must wear a mask? Have I personally felt the need to wear a mask when I'm walking into the city building this morning? I would say no. But if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. And perhaps if you are in that high-risk subgrouping, wear a mask. Particularly if you think you're stepping into some potentially crowded environment, you just can't help it. You personally, for some reason, even though you're at risk, have to step into the grocery store. Wear a mask. It should not be a medical grade mask. One of the, I think, things in the back of the CDC's mind has been if we come out with a strong mask directive, it will consume medical grade masks for people who we really want to have a medical grade mask here, if not immediately, within a few weeks. Cotton masks have been studied. They are not as thorough in preventing the size particle from getting in your airway that is felt to be germane to this particular virus. but it is some protection. So feel free to wear a cotton mask or a scarf. It's okay. If you're fiddling with the mask, think to wash your hands. That if the front of the mask has caught someone's cough or sneeze, it'll be contaminated theoretically. So if you're fiddling with it, wash your hands.
All right. We're also joined by David Sloan from the Times-Union, Nick Duranick from News Now. I would certainly open that up for questions.
Well, the first question I was thinking of is, with the extension to the 18th, I know the county is like, if you're not working, employees get 2/3 of pay. Is the city employees who aren't working until the 18th going to see a reduction in pay?
We had a discussion at the council meeting about that. We actually passed an ordinance before all this started, and we determined that not knowing how long this was going to go, the ordinance allows for up to 60 days where both those that are working and those that are at home will receive the same pay. This is in ordinance form. This talks specifically about this issue, and it's only an issue during an emergency. The posture that we've taken as a city is that we are going to split a lot of shifts to minimize exposure. And although a lot of our folks are not working full-time, and I don't know many businesses now that are working full-time, but they will be on call, they will be working at home, they will be splitting shifts within the city. So we consider just about everyone essential at this point. That is, though, part of the reason that we looked at just doing a 2-week order. And again, depending on how long this goes, we're waiting to see if local governments are provided any types of incentives similar to what small businesses and all of our citizens will be benefiting from a $1,200 check from the government. Local units of government have not heard if there's any way to compensate for some of the wages, but we're committed to our employees doing their jobs during this crisis. But again, the longer we go, that becomes more of a question, and certainly the council after 60 days will have to answer that question. And it's a good question. So it's a combination of how long this goes and whether or not local units might be on the receiving end of some compensation for this, which right now they're not.
Chief Whitaker, going on the, you mentioned something about the enforcement of...
You know what? I'm sorry, guys. Let me turn that microphone on, or just repeat the question. I think we're a little beyond that, but would you repeat the question, Chief, when Nick asked that?
Do you want me to wait?
Or, let's wait for the mic.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so Chief Whitaker, going back on the enforcement for the essential businesses, just clarify for me, you said that if you've gotten a call about a concern of a non-essential business, that was something you guys submit to the prosecutor's office to investigate? And is that something you guys would not investigate?
We would prepare a report and forward that to the prosecutor's office for their review. We
Okay.
would not make the determination of it being non-essential on our own. That would be something that we would send to the prosecutor's office. And again, I don't know that we've received many calls at all pertaining to non-essential businesses. I'm sure that they are there. We know that they're there. But again, I expect that the governor's office, and we in our conversations, to, lack of better words, tighten the screws, and in the upcoming, so that we may have further guidelines as to the essential and non-essential businesses.
Yeah, and to that end, I know when the governor talked about splitting up the enforcement responsibilities between the Indiana State Police and the Department of Tobacco and Alcohol. I think the excise will be handling restaurants and bars, and I know they will be going about that in their fashion. We are not involved in that. And again, with regards to local businesses, look, we're all suffering. All businesses are down. The last thing we want to do is go in with a heavy hand and demand somebody close their doors. But we're also appealing to the importance, the science that I have sitting here to my right, the epidemiology, the emerging facts. We know that we can impact how this spreads in our community if we do what is asked of us. So, we certainly appeal to the greater good of the community to not provide business that's not allowed for. And I would think that our citizens would understand that, and but I certainly understand how difficult it is for businesses in this day and age. I know there have been economic considerations given by the federal government, SBA loans for paying employees for 8 weeks start today. The applications, I should say. So there's the stimulus that's coming to every household in this county that makes, I think, under $75,000 for an individual, and I think it's $150 for joint filing. There will be a stimulus coming within the next several weeks. So the government certainly understands how critical it is that these businesses get through this. And again, the last thing we want to do is go in and create a heavy-handed approach. I don't think that's what the governor wants to do, but it's so critical that we all comply with this, again, to try and slow the spread. It's a very difficult issue. I think the president got caught up in that just a little bit when he said, we're going to be, back together by Easter, and I think the voice of reason, his public health officials said, look, it's your job to be the cheerleader. However, we got to be realistic about this. And I think you've seen that, those deadlines have extended. Obviously, the president has extended the emergency to, I think, April 28th. And the talk is that it's going to go beyond that as well. So kind of a long answer to your question, but, we're all in this together, and our law enforcement is not here to go in and start banging on doors. What we will do is if, we see folks congregating, we're going to ask them that they go home or that they spread out, keep walking. If you're going out for a walk or bike ride, that's great. You need to do that. We all need to do that. But I noticed there's signs in the parks to keep people off of playground. I've seen signs over in the Winona Lake Park there's kind of rules for social engagement on the trails. Who would have thought we would ever gotten to this point? So, but we are at this point, and that's what we're asking our citizens, our businesses. If you are essential and you must remain open and do business, you need to provide those safeguards to your employees and anybody coming into your business. If you're a citizen, you need to think very hard about what you're out doing, and if it's not essential, you need to be at home cleaning out the garage. So, I know Mr. Spalding had sent a few questions. I know he had mentioned the need for the community to come together and do more planning. I think there's been a massive amount of planning that's being done, and part of the reason for holding these press conferences weekly is to have folks understand how much this community is coming together. Law enforcement's coming together. Our first responders are coming together. I can't speak highly enough of Kosciuszko County government, the Sheriff's Department, the County Health Department, the commissioners. Everybody gets this. I tend to rely, being a medical professional and optometrist, I know how critical this epidemiology is, and there's nothing that can be, the facts are the facts. What's reported is reported. There's no twisting the facts when it comes to this. And the only twisting we can do is for our citizens and our businesses to continue to abide by these restrictions so that we can impact those facts that are coming out. And that means trying to, maybe have a 4th of July picnic this year, as you suggested. But I think that's where we're at. Do you gentlemen have any other questions?
But worst case scenario, if emergency services got down to a very small number of men is there a backup plan, or is it just whoever's left is kind of,
Chief, I'll let you answer that.
Well, absolutely, the basic reason we changed our shift dimension was just for that. In the event that we were to somehow lose a shift, even though our to a quarantine, is that we're only losing 25% at one given time. And again, that's if all the officers were exposed on a specific incident. Outside of that, we do have a second line, which is our detective division, which we keep away from our patrol division. So we're making sure that these officers are not even remotely around each other. We're asking for that even after hours. But given that, this group of law enforcement leaders, sheriff, police chiefs, Indiana State Police, we're all here for each other. We're not, there's no expectation that every one of us are going to be exposed and not have law enforcement. And the whole idea of the social distancing is that even if there are exposures, we're going to recover. They're going to be back out on the street, potentially before other exposures. So that's, I guess to answer your question, we expect it to be able to provide a service throughout this entire pandemic.
And again, that just kind of underscores what we've done from an HR standpoint, keeping everybody active, even though they're not working full, they're splitting shifts, they're staying apart, and that's really the way we're managing this. I also want to just talk for a moment, and then I think we'll be finished here. There's great things going on in this community. Our schools, the school corporations in this community, in the county, are delivering literally thousands of meals to the kids in this county. And, that's just happening. I'm not seeing much about that, but that's critical. There's a group, when we talk about organizing, there's a group that is now go-to meeting once a week, trying to mobilize food resources for everyone. And again, keeping track so that nobody falls through the cracks that way. There's a group of 4 of the foundations, Zimmer Biomed, Kosciuszko County, K21, and the United Way, have donated now twice to the needs of this community. I mentioned earlier, there's big groups of folks that are sewing masks and gowns, and these are just the minimum number of things that I've been hearing about. They just go, the list goes on and on and on. So I just, I want y'all to understand it's going to be painful. We want our businesses to comply. We want our citizens to comply. But most folks in this community understand how critical this is. And it's really important that we all understand that that's the only way we're going to get through this. A lot is needed. Times are going to get harder before they get easier. But we're all in this. And again, be assured that many organizations are working hard and are pulling together. Please check on your loved ones and those suffering from mental health issues. This is a very difficult and dark time for loneliness and for those that have mental health concerns. Don't forget to call your mother. I'm reminded of that constantly. Actually, I've started FaceTiming with my mother, so that's a good thing. If you're able to donate, do that. Please support our bars and restaurants and other local businesses if you can. Again, be smart about it when you go out to pick up, get right back home. Most important, I want you to practice very good health measures. Any final thoughts? The one thing I do want to clarify, the executive order that I issued was basically for the city of Warsaw employees and our organization. I have issued a declaration of emergency declaration for the city. I think that was early on. These executive orders are just allowing us to continue to pay our employees to provide these services. So the executive order issued today was simply for our city hall, and for our city organization. The governor's executive order and the president's emergency declaration are what apply to our communities. And I would ask you all to stay tuned. 2:30 this afternoon, I believe the governor will extend the order, and I'd ask you all to follow up on that. So if there aren't any more questions, again, I'll remind you we'll be back here Wednesday at 10:30. Pretty much same format, maybe with a couple new faces. And again, thanks to Dr. Remington for spending the time today, and my chief of police and fire chief. And I know Commissioner Jackson will be joining us next Wednesday representing the county. All right, thank you.